Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Holland. In the summer of 1979, 35 years ago, I was a 20-year-old history student and faced the question of where to spend my summer vacation. Would it be picking grapes in France or volunteering in a kibbutz? I decided for the second option and found myself in Kibbutz Ruchama, not far from the Negev. Besides the fact that I enjoyed new scents and colors and sunshine, of course, I specifically remember that I was fascinated by the stories of the volunteers who were from places all over the world. A man from Paris spoke about his Russian grandmother, a young woman from Denmark about her Polish grandfather. My eyes noticed beautiful Hebrew signs and letters everywhere that sparked my curiosity about what was written there, since I was not able to read one single letter. That's why I decided 1 year later to enter an Ulpan course at the Hebrew University, and I stayed in the dormitories at the site where you all gather today, Mount Scopus. I could never have predicted that 35 years later, a Hebrew book by my hand would have been published in a city so dear to my heart, Jerusalem. After my trips to Israel, I specialized in Jewish history. I love listening to the stories of the people, doing research and writing them down. The book which is presented today, Akkoord Acharon Shel Yaldut, is a translation of the Dutch book Slotakkoord der Kinderjaren, which was published in 2003. The book is about the Jewish Lyceum in The Hague during World War II, more precisely the 18 months that the school existed, from October 1941 to April 1943. I'd like to thank Yad Vashem, the Center for Research on the History of Dutch Jewry, and above all, Shulamit Bamberger, the translator, for all the work done to help the book see the light of the day. The initiator of the first Dutch edition was Mr. Rolf Nieholm, a former student of the Jewish Lyceum in The Hague. In 2002, he by chance saw a class picture in a Jewish weekly with the caption, "Do you recognize one of these students?" Rolf recognized himself as a student in his senior year. The picture was not taken long before his exams at the Jewish Lyceum. This excited his interest in the history of his class and of the school in general, and he became very active in tracing his former classmates. He also soon discovered school files in the municipal archives of The Hague. Already in his 80s, he felt the need for a historian who would be able to gather the facts, and that is how I met Rolf and his wife Fritzje. I did not agree with his first plan to make lists of the names of the students and put the papers back into the files for later historians. No. As his enthusiasm grew and we heard more fascinating stories, we realized that these stories deserved a place in a book to be read by a broad audience. Rolf eventually located 65 former pupils of the school, and I clearly remembered his excited phone calls, even in the late evenings or on Sundays, saying, "Do you know who I found all the way in Australia?" And then he mentioned a name, and I knew exactly who it was and to which class he or she belonged. The next step was me contacting the individuals. In the end, I interviewed 14, and more than 30 former pupils wrote down their memories, some of them adding diaries, letters, and pictures from the school years. I also researched many files and consulted all kinds of books and literature. I must point out that these former pupils, who were already in their 70s and 80s, had to look back for more than 60 years. In the interviews with these men and women, I could not at once discover the memories about their school. Those memories were embedded in their war stories. It was like descending from the wider story back into their school years, like a funnel. An extra handicap was that the school had existed only for a short period of time. Some of the pupils only had been at school for 10 months, months that had been followed by a much more difficult time in their life due to hiding or deportation. Memories of that darker period were like a blanket covering the memories of the school years. As a result, those memories often have been cleansed of negative images. This is what the Dutch historian Dienke Hondius called the Polish memory. And sure, the time before hiding or deportation was a relatively happy one. The separation of parents had not yet taken place. There was less fear. And by projecting that happy time onto the school years, those memories got a special shine. The school existed for 18 months, and it became clear that memories of the second school year, from September 1942 till April 1943, being the month of fear and deportation, do not exist or are repressed. We have to realize that in this respect, the value of memories is in some ways limited. Try to think for yourself of events that happened in your high school years. It's very difficult or impossible to put them in an exact timeline. That's why diaries are such a valuable source of research. They represent time and feelings as they were really experienced. As luck would have it, a teacher of the Jewish Lyceum, Dr. Gabriel Italy, kept a detailed diary for years, from 1936 till 1951. And his witness to the war years was an inspiring and reliable source of life during the war years, both in personal matters as well as school life. This diary was such a valuable resource that I edited and annotated the work, which was published in hardcover in 2009 and in paperback 2 years later. In my book, I describe the history of the school, weaving together the facts with the memory of the students, as well as the general history of the policy of the German occupier and its impact on the Jews in The Hague. I focus on the students and their families in particular. I tried to reflect and quote as many remembrances as possible, even if they were reduced by the years into fragments. I give voice to former students who tell about the shock of having to leave their old school and entering classes full of unknown children. Some talk about how they felt being considered as Jews, because some up to that time didn't even know they were. They describe how they experienced the lessons, the teachers, the requirements to wear the yellow star, and later in history, the fear of raids and deportations. So much happened in only 18 months of the school's existence, too much to speak about today, that I asked the organization to hand out the sheets which you find on your chairs. All the same, I'd like to give you an impression of the school by showing you some pictures and figures. School started in October 1941 in an out-of-use building of the Protestant community at Fischer Street 135. It was an old, dirty building, paint cracking off the walls, and enormous charcoal burners in the corners of the classroom to keep the students warm in the very cold winters of those days. When school started, 241 pupils were present. Over the month, the numbers declined rapidly. Imagine being in a class where school benches become more empty every day because classmates and teachers, without notice, don't show up anymore because of raids, deportation, or hiding. Imagine cold, lack of educational material, a long way to walk to school because you are forbidden to use public transport and bicycles. But at the same time, try to imagine the strength and the spirit of the teachers as well as the children to remain positive and hopeful. Children, sweating for their exams as they believed in a speedy end of war and in their own future. Imagine their ability to rejoice at school parties and enjoy friendships, to fall in love and play as normal children do. It's this mix of feeling the tightening rope on the one hand and the spirit of teachers and pupils to make the best of school life and life in general on the other. This touches one heart. As readers, we know how all this was going to end, and that makes it so terrible. The realization of loss of so much potential creates the feeling that you want to shove history in another direction. The facts are that 65% of the pupils didn't survive the deportations. 51% of the general staff and the teachers lost their lives. I would like to add a little about the recent history. Only 2 months ago, there was a modest meeting at a spot in the Fischestraat where once stood the Jewish Lyceum. The area is totally renovated, and at number 135 we now find 2 primary schools. Due to the publication of this book and the never-ending initiatives of the previously mentioned Rolf Nieholm, a simple plaque was unveiled in remembrance of the children of the Jewish Lyceum. The text says, from 1941 till 1943, 279 children went to the Jewish Lyceum at this spot. They were not safe. Not in their homes, not in the streets, not at school. 179 of them were caught and deported from Holland. They never returned home. It was a special moment and very touching to stand there, the former pupils of the Lyceum, together with the younger generation, commemorating all together what had happened to pupils and teachers generations ago at that specific spot. The board of the school has decided to continue the practice of holding a commemoration every year to raise consciousness about the potential outcome of targeting groups of people for social, economical, and political exclusion. For me, it feels like the cycle is complete. By remembering, by mentioning the names of the victims, they are saved from oblivion, and in this way we give meaning to the instruction in Deuteronomy, Velo yemacheh shemo miYisrael. I hope many of you will read my book and that it may inspire researchers and students of history to look for other stories, to open them up for a wider audience. All of you have a story to tell, your story, and we all are interested in hearing them, to never forget. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon of study.